And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Indiana Hoosiers beat the Iowa Hawkeyes at home 85-78. It was a much-needed win for Indiana, coming off the really disappointing loss at Penn State, and with a game at East Lansing against Michigan State coming up this weekend. This was a huge, huge opportunity for Indiana to get a signature win. And once again, a highly rated team came into Assembly Hall and went home a loser. And look, there are a lot of reasons why Indiana won this game. We're going to break all of them down for you tonight on this episode of the Assembly Call. But there was definitely some Assembly Hall magic that was working its way in the favor of the Hoosiers tonight. Look no further than two possessions there at the end of the game. One where Iowa basically gets 4 shots at it, a wide-open 3 for Jared Uthoff, and 3 looks at the rim. None of them fall. And then on a subsequent possession, with the offense looking totally off-kilter and out of sync, Troy Williams pulls up for a long 2, makes it. And those 2 possessions right there, almost the difference in the game. I mean, those were huge possessions for Indiana down the stretch. So the Hoosiers played well, made some plays of their own, but certainly Assembly Hall helped. And hey, that's why when ranked teams come into Assembly Hall, you rank them, we spank them. Indiana did it again. It's not an accident. It's not a fluke. It's what this team does under Tom Crean. And there are some trends, some consistent things under Tom Crean that we don't like, but this is one that we definitely do like, and a big hat tip to the guys tonight for coming up with a huge, huge win. Well, I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined tonight by our full lineup here on the Assembly Call with Will DeWitt, Ryan Phillips, and Andy Bottoms. And let's begin by going around the horn as we always do, and we will start with the banner moment. And there's a lot of different ways to go with this one, but I want to go to the bench because I thought the big difference in the game tonight was that Indiana got really big contributions from their bench, and Iowa didn't. I mean, you take one glance at the box score, and you see that Iowa's bench did not score. But when you look at what Indiana's bench did, Max Bielfeldt came in and scored 10 big points with Thomas Bryant saddled with foul trouble for most of the evening. Nick Zeisloff made 3 really big threes in the first half. Didn't do much in the second half, but those 3 threes in the first half were huge. OG Anunoby had 4 points, a couple of really nice plays. Harrison Niego in the second half made a huge bucket. I believe it was 60-56, and Iowa had a lot of the momentum, and Niego made a big shot on the baseline, and then a couple possessions later forced a turnover and got the Indiana crowd, the Assembly Hall crowd, going again. And then Juwan Morgan really played big defense off the bench and had a big bucket late where he got an offensive rebound, put it back in, and Tom Crean kept going to him in the second half, guarding Jared Uthoff, and he was as effective as anyone. He didn't necessarily stop him, but slowed him down, made it harder for Uthoff to do what he does best. So just a really good night for Indiana's bench on a night where everybody contributed to this victory, and to me, that's the big banner moment, because when it comes to February games on the road or even at home against tough competition, the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, you need guys to step up when your big guns aren't having their best shooting nights. Yogi Ferrell didn't have a great shooting night tonight, but because Nick Zeisloff did, and because Max Bielfeldt stepped up and the other guys made plays, Indiana was able to overcome and get this huge, huge victory. So big hat tip to the bench, and now let's go around the horn, and we will start with Andy Bottoms. Andy, give us your Bottoms line on this IU victory.
Well, you touched on it in what you brought up, because I was just looking back at the play-by-play, and IU was down 60-56 at the 9:41 mark after human moving screen Adam Woodbury made a free throw. And starting with that Niego jumper, by my count, glancing through here, IU scored on 10 straight possessions, turned that 4-point deficit into a 9-point lead, the last of which was Juwan Morgan's free throw that he made at about the 4.5-minute mark. So, you know, in that roughly 5-minute stretch, IU scored every time it touched the ball. And it was a spot where, you know, they had all the momentum in the world at the beginning of the game. The crowd's going crazy and all that, but they really, you know, the crowd kind of got out of it, and things seemed to be slipping away at that point in the game. And, you know, I think fitting on a night like tonight when the bench played so well, as you mentioned, that a guy who most didn't even expect to to play in this game, made a number of big plays. He made that was the only basket he made. He forced at least a couple turnovers that I can recall. He came down and forced one right away on the other end of that led to a Bielefeld bucket. So I thought he was terrific, and Morgan, as you said, gave him some great minutes. And then mixed in there, Troy made a 3-point play. Yogi hit a 3 and a few free throws, and that really got him going. And despite the fact that it did get within 3 there down the stretch, I mean, that was really the turning point in the game. Was that run there? So it was one that seemed a little bit unexpected. As good as this team is offensively and had been at various points, and so it was something that I was impressed by, given how the game was going at that point. So that to me was a turning point, and and really what gave this win to IU in the long run.
Ryan, what's your rant tonight?
The thing that I think we need to focus on is that Indiana won this game not from the three-point line. In the second half, they were 2 of 12 from three, but were 12 of 29 from the field. So of 10, they had 10 field goals from 2-point range, 2 from 3-point range. That means they were being aggressive. They were going for it. That was not the case against Penn State the other night, and that was the reason they lost that game. They rediscovered their aggressiveness against a better team, and we're just attacking the hoop and going after it and getting rebounds and putting putbacks and things like that. The things that this team needs to be its bread and butter. I realize they're all great shooters, but that needs to be secondary. You don't come down the floor and just fire up a three. You've got to run the offense. You've got to work it through the inside. When you've got talented post players, you've got to feed them, let them make the kickouts, and hit your threes that way. But just gunning and firing is not the way to do things. And the secondary thing I want to talk about the second half, because I think that's where Indiana won it, and that's where Indiana really played the way it needs to play moving forward. And that's Troy Williams. I mean, he got yanked out of the game after the first 3 possessions, and then yanked out of the game of the first 3 possessions in the second half, came back, tied for the lead in scoring with 9 points, 2 rebounds, and assist, only 2 turnovers. He was 3 of 4 from the field, 3 of 5 from the free throw line. I mean, he turned his game around on a dime there. And you see all the reasons why Troy shouldn't be playing sometimes, with his turnovers, with boneheaded mistakes, all that stuff. But then you see that rebound tip-in he had that nobody else on the team could have made. You see him splitting 2 defenders and firing up an off-balance jumper and nailing it. I mean, you see all those things and you think, God, if this guy could just eliminate the mistakes. As I said, he had 2 turnovers in the second half, and those came on the first 2 possessions of the second half, or 2 of 3. But they came right then. He got yanked, went to the bench, and came back in and focused and played the way he should. And I thought he actually played great defense for most of the night as well, which I didn't expect to see. So got to give a hat tip to Troy Williams. I thought he played a great game, especially in that second half. And, the way the Hoosiers played in the second half, being aggressive, going forward, not backtracking, that's the way they need to play to finish the year. They need to attack. This team is at its best when it's attacking.
Yeah, good point on Troy. He really responded to that benching, which hasn't always been the case, but he did a great job. And, Indiana took a big punch from Iowa at the end of the first half and the start of the second half, and they punched right back, and it was great to see. Will, there's a lot of important numbers tonight. Good luck picking just one, but what's your stat of the game?
Yeah, I'm going to take a long-winded approach here with it, but kind of looking at offensive rebounds tonight. Both teams finished with 19, but IU won with the offensive rebounding percentage with 54.3 compared to Iowa's 48.7. That 54.3 is 16% over our average, and we're 11th in the country, so that's pretty phenomenal. But I'm actually going to look at the first half of these numbers because they were even more phenomenal than that. In the first half, we had an offensive rebounding percentage, and I'm not making this up, 70.6%. That's just ridiculous. At one point, we had 6 offensive boards in the first 6 minutes of the game. We were, getting pretty much every miss we had. I think we had 12 offensive boards on 17 missed shots in that first half, which led to 17 second chance points, and we finished the game with 26. So I thought that was a very pivotal part of the game to get all those second chance points early, because obviously we needed each and every one of those points down the stretch.
Yeah, those offensive rebounds were huge. Obviously, you would like to not give up so many offensive rebounds to Iowa, but in the end, Indiana got enough, and they were able to win the game. Good stat there, Will. All right, everybody, a quick reminder that we want all of you on our email list. We are now well past 1,600 people on the email list. It just keeps growing. Our IU Hoops newsletter, we send it out the morning after every game. Even on games like tonight, when it's late, there will be an email sitting there for you in the morning breaking this entire game down, my thoughts on it, Andy's analysis, Will's stat of the night. So make sure you get on the email list. It's assemblycall.com/subscribe. That's the URL. Or if you're not anywhere where you can be on a computer and you just want to text, you can do that too. Text Indiana, INDIANA, to the number 44144. You'll get a reply. Then all you have to do is text your email address back, and you will be on the list. And you can relive this game tomorrow morning when you get up, because what's better on the morning after an IU win than a pleasant email sitting there reminding you of it? Get on the email list. Do it for yourself. Make sure that you can smile tomorrow morning seeing the Assembly Call email. Again, assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana to 44144. So I did a pregame show. Actually, let me reset here. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, Will DeWitt. We're breaking down this great IU victory tonight over Iowa. I'm so excited. I just want to get talking about the game. We did a pregame show tonight, popular demand. Many of you asked me to do it, so I did it. And some games, it doesn't quite go according to the plan. But tonight, a lot of what we talked about on the pregame show as keys for Indiana, both based on the numbers and based on what Tom Crean said in his talk with Fish, really came to fruition. When you looked at what has happened for Iowa when they've lost games, they haven't blocked many shots. And Iowa came into this game blocking 14.4% of their opponent's shots. They were top 20 in the country in this. They only blocked one tonight. And when they lost to Maryland earlier in the Big Ten season at Maryland, they only blocked 2 Maryland shots. And in 3 of their 4 losses, Iowa was below their season average in block percentage. That happened tonight. In 3 of Iowa's 4 losses, Peter Jok was also held below his season average of 15 points. Jok only had 12 points tonight. And I thought Yogi was phenomenal early on him. And I thought, after he had that little stretch there where he made a couple threes, Indiana rebounded and did a nice job on him again. Obviously, he left a little bit with the ankle injury, but for the most part, Indiana did a really nice job of that. And then the other thing is turnovers, folks. I mean, Iowa came in 4th in the country in turnover percentage, and they pretty much stayed true to form. They only turned it over on 14.5 of their possessions. And it's Indiana that has obviously struggled with that, up in the 20s. But when Indiana has won and when they've played well, they've kept it down in the 15-16% range. And tonight, Indiana was at 17.4%. They had a couple of stretches where they had turnovers, late in the first half, early in the second half. Outside of that, they really did a nice job of protecting the ball. And so I think when you look at the numbers, those to me really stand out as important reasons why Indiana was able to capitalize tonight. Andy, is there anything else that jumps out to you, just kind of looking at the numbers, or any other big individual performances that you want to comment on in terms of leading IU to victory tonight? Or Ryan?
Yeah, I think Robert Johnson was was one of the keys, particularly in the first half. I thought he played really well. He scored 8 points, had a couple threes, was 3 of 9 from the field, 2 rebounds and assists in the first half, and then the second half he had 5 points, an assist, 2 rebounds. He did have 2 turnovers, but he was 1 of 1 from the field, made both his free throws, and the 3 he hit, the one shot he hit, was really clutch. I thought it was a ball just kind of bounced out to him, and he stepped into it and made it. So yeah, I think he's a guy that you have to look at because he also played excellent defense all night. We've been getting that from him, since the beginning of the season. Even when he's had some struggles, he's been playing excellent defense, and I thought that the defense was really the key. The stretches where Indiana played solid defense, Iowa couldn't do anything. There was some stretches where Iowa kind of ran a little, ran a lot of screens on the inside and things like that, and Tom Crean mentioned it at halftime that we weren't getting any calls on the moving screens away from the ball, and it really manifested. So you could see it looking for it in the second half. I saw it in the first half, and I just kind of shrugged it off as whatever. But it was pretty much every time they're running a screen, somebody from Iowa stepping out. And hey, you know what? If they're not calling it, that's not Iowa's fault. Iowa should do that until they call it. And they were stepping into cutters and things like that. And so what happened was Indiana got frustrated. Indiana was running a little ragged defensively, and for about 20 minutes in there, 15 minutes in there, Iowa was pretty much able to do whatever it wanted offensively. What happened was Indiana regrouped and stepped up, and Robert Johnson was part of that. He was a big part of that, and I think that a guy like Bielfeldt did a great job on Woodbury. I mean, we probably weren't expecting to use him as much tonight because of the size disadvantage. I thought he did a very good job. He got beaten for some rebounds, but other than that, he was real solid down there. Yogi obviously is going to give you great defense. I mean, so I think that was the key to the game, was defensively. I mean, you can score as many points as you want if you don't stop the other team. And we've seen it with this Indiana team before. If you don't stop the other team, it's gonna end up biting you on the other end. And when Indiana stepped up and started playing defense, that's when they went on a big run in the first half, and that's where they went on that big run in the second half.
Yeah, and you mentioned in our chat too, Ryan, that the free throw shooting was really important tonight. This Iowa team is not one that puts people at the line. I mentioned earlier they block a lot of shots, but they've also done it without allowing teams to go to the line. I think they were top 10 in the country in defensive free throw rate coming into this game, and Indiana was able to get to the line 21 times. Now, I know part of that was late and Iowa's fouling to try and get back in the game, but still, they were about even with Iowa if you remove those, and Indiana made theirs. 18 of 21 for 85%. Iowa only made 56% from the line. And that's an experienced team. You would expect them to make those free throws. That was another big reason for Indiana being able to win this game. Andy, I think we've got you back. Are you here?
I think so.
Yes. So Ryan just stole your thunder talking about Robert Johnson and his terrific performance tonight. I'd like to get your thoughts, Andy.
Yeah, Andy.
Well, we're going to allow you to steal Ryan's thunder and talk about Max Bielfeldt, because I thought, let's talk about he and Thomas together, because when you look at that combination together, they gave you 20 points, they give you 6 offensive rebounds, 11 rebounds total, a couple of steals, a couple of blocks. And, I thought Thomas had some moments where he was effective when he was in there, but even with only the 4 fouls there late, Tom Crean stuck with Max Bielfeldt. And I thought he made some really big plays late. What'd you think of the performance of both of those guys, and specifically Max, and Crean sticking with him and not even going back to Brian at the end of the game?
Yeah, I think Ryan tweeted this out at the end of the game that he felt like it was the right move to stick with that lineup. It was what had been working, and I would say the same thing. I mean, I had a couple people, kind of asking, like, why is Bryant still on the bench? I think we've seen this before where we feel like we have these stretches, these lineups where things are working, and then all of a sudden, we make a change and then things go south. So I like the fact that Crean stuck with him. I thought Bielfeldt was playing well. I mean, the place where they both struggled was keeping Woodbury off the glass. So I don't think either did a particularly good job of that on the defensive end. So I'm not sure there was a lot to be gained there. And felt like Max was in a pretty good rhythm. Missed both of his threes, but gave 10 big points off the bench. Just another guy who came in and made big contributions off the bench. Grabbed 4 rebounds, a couple steals, a couple blocks. I just thought he played really well, and Morgan was also giving him some good minutes there. I think OG didn't play maybe as much as we thought he might down the stretch, but Morgan was doing a really good job on Utah when he was in. I thought he did a good job moving his feet and really trying to stay in front of him and make him at least take tough shots if he was going to score. So I definitely like the fact that Crean stuck with it. Bryant was felt like the same story, that the fouls really took him out. I thought it was again kind of a roll of the dice move from Crean to bring him back in the first half. It kind of helped him stay engaged in the game, which I thought was good, but he clearly was just getting out of the way of people, and I don't blame him as far as how that goes. But he really struggled, and it was just interesting to me, and I still don't really understand given how many minutes he played in the second half. But I was surprised at Juwan Morgan that he wasn't trying to steal minutes with him in the first half when you knew Bielfeldt couldn't play the last 16 minutes of the half without taking a rest. It seemed like Morgan was the guy to bring in for him. But whatever the reason, he was able to get Bryant back in the game a little bit, kept him out of foul trouble. But again, he kind of gave up a couple baskets just because he was trying not to foul. And again, I just kind of felt like gets so caught up in the officiating. There was a time that he gave up a basket where he was just trying to stand there to show that his hands were up on a play against Woodbury, which they were, but then Woodbury misses a shot, nobody blows a whistle, and the Woodbury just goes right up and gets a rebound, and then he fouls him, and that was when he got his 4th foul. So I just thought I got too caught up in trying to not make fouls and how, weak a couple of the calls were, which is probably fair. But again, it seemed like that kind of took him out of his rhythm, and at that point, Bielfeldt was playing well enough that I would agree it didn't really make sense to make a change, and you got to kind of ride it out with the lineup that was in there that came in and got the lead back.
We've got an interesting little discussion going on here in our chat about who the MVP is of this game. Ryan made the bold statement that maybe it was Colin Hartman, who did have 7 big points. He had 7 boards, that big dunk late. But if you remember back to the first half, we might have seen peak Colin Hartman when he stuffed Utah at the rim and then goes down on the other end and drains a 3. And don't forget that only happened because Troy Williams hustled down and grabbed the errant Hartman pass that preceded the 3-pointer. But that 2-possession stretch was huge for Hartman, and he played pretty solid defense. Lots of good Colin Hartman things tonight. But, you go up and down the board. I mean, Troy had a really nice performance in the second half. Yogi, I know, was only 2 for 12. And yet when it was winning time, Indiana kept getting him the ball, and he kept breaking the press, which was huge, and made his free throws 8 for 8. Max off the bench. I mean, I'm not really sure that you can pick an MVP in this one. Ryan, do you want to plant your flag and name Colin Hartman the MVP? You gonna go out on that limb?
You're right. It's really hard to pick one. I mean, if you go by the last 5 minutes, it was Yogi. He was solid with the basketball, hit all of his free throws. He was 8 of 8 on the night. Was the leading scorer in the end, despite not a great shooting night. He hit that huge 3 in the corner. It didn't look like there was any room to get the shot off, and just buried it right in the defender's face. But again, you're right. I mean, Troy in certain stretches was the best player on the floor. But the thing about Colin Hartman is, while guys had up and down nights, he was good throughout, and we complained about him in the Penn State game and talked about how, that was a really bad game for him. And usually when he has a bad game, we said it on the postgame show after Penn State, when he has a really bad game, he comes back and steps up. And, he rebounded really well. He had a block. He had a steal. He had, let's see. How many assists did he have? 2 assists, 2 offensive rebounds. I mean, he played through. He had 4 fouls at the end of the game, but you felt like he was playing pretty. He was guarding probably the National Player of the Year candidate from the Big Ten this year, and Utah got off and hit some crazy shots, but I felt like most of those were against other guys who were guarding him, and Hartman did a pretty good job, especially to start the game, because the thing we said, and the thing I talked about today on Twitter, was you can't let Utah get off early. You cannot let him just dominate you from the get-go, because then that's going to be demoralizing. And it really took Utah a while to get going. He sort of did late in the first half and made some contested shots. I mean, so I thought Hartman played a great game on both ends of the floor, very complete, and we've said it before many times. He only scored 7 points. He is not a guy that needs to fill up the scoring sheet to have a huge impact on a game, and I thought he did tonight.
The other interesting thing you mentioned, Ryan, when we were chatting was, how much better Juwan Morgan really played defensively than OG Anunoby on Utah, because that was a big, kind of a big thought coming in, is maybe you put OG on Utah, but there were several times, and look, a senior like Utah is going to abuse freshmen. They just ran that little back pick, and Utah, just moving without the ball, just took the freshman to school, which is going to happen. It even happened to Morgan the first time he was in there, but once Morgan settled into the game, he really made it hard on Utah. And again, not a guy where you're going to see the contributions in the stat sheet, but as much as you want to see OG out there, and he did make a few big plays, totally warranted, I thought, to keep Morgan in the game at the end over OG based on what he was doing defensively.
Yeah, look, OG's a great player. We love him. We talk about him every week. He didn't have a great game tonight. I thought he did some nice things offensively, but defensively, he was getting consistently beaten by Utah. And you know what? There's no shame in that. Utah has beaten guys up all year, so there's no shame in that. It happens. You're a freshman. He's a senior. He's a National Player of the Year candidate. He's been beating up guys all over this league, so it's not something he should hang his head about. But it was one of those things where after a while, I think that Coach Crean just couldn't put him back in on it, because it just became a situation where no matter what you're doing, this guy's going to abuse you, whether it's just you're not playing that well or he's just got confidence that he can beat you because you're a freshman. Juwan Morgan came in and played, and you know what he did was he kept whatever he did, he kept Uthoff in front of him. And make him a jump shooter. Make him shoot over. Do not let him get to the goal. And he did. Uthoff got to the goal early on Morgan. Then after that, he just sort of settled down, got in a stance, and made him a jump shooter. Now, Uthoff is going to hit shots like that. He is. It's just he's going to hit contested shots. He's going to hit shots with guys in his face, everything. But he's going to hit less of those than he is driving layups. And so I thought it was a really good strategy. I thought Morgan played very well when he was in there, and he made a couple great contributions on offense. He hit 1 or 2 free throws late. The one he missed rattled in and out. It didn't look bad at all. Just kind of didn't fall. But his other one, he drained. And so, you're seeing a guy in a huge, enormous game. You're seeing a guy step up and have a really nice game against a great player, and then coming down on offense and making contributions and playing smart. So, again, it's just encouraging. This freshman class keeps impressing us. And even while Bryant and Anunoby didn't have their best games tonight, Bryant because of foul trouble, I thought he was playing really well when he was in there. But you still get a great contribution from Morgan. Now, next game, maybe Morgan doesn't play as well, but you're going to get something from the other guys. This freshman class is a complete class, and they're all contributing, and that's really impressive at this point with these guys.
Yeah, no, very impressive. Andy, real quick before we take a little break here, I do want to bring you in and talk about what this game means. I mean, we know that it's a huge game. Indiana needed kind of that signature win, but how huge is it? I mean, it's a home game, so obviously it doesn't count quite as much as if the win came on the road, but when it comes to Indiana's seeding, kind of future in the tournament, what does a game like this mean?
Well, I think the big thing is that they hadn't played a lot of really good teams. I mean, when you look at it from an RPI perspective, really Duke, Notre Dame, and now this game are really the only ones that are.
I think we're having some issues with your audio there, Andy. So we'll try and get you back to talk about this real quick. I do want to let everybody know you all have been so generous in helping us out in supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And one way that people have been supporting the show is actually with these awesome coasters that have our assembly call logo adorned on them. Ryan, do you want to show everybody your sweatshirt too? See, with the assembly call logo on it, there they are. But we have these coasters. If you go to assemblycall.com/gear, they are right there. You can pick these up, and actually 25% of the proceeds on those will go to support the show, to help us. We're going to get Will a new mic, for all the things that we can do to expand the show with the chat and all the new features that we want to add. Your assistance really helps us do more with the show, get it out to more people, and continue to expand what we do. So again, that URL is assemblycall.com/gear, and if you want to pick up one of those coasters, they are there, and we will also have plenty of other gear there in the future as well. All right, everybody. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Tonight we are talking about Indiana's thrilling 85-78 win over Iowa. Yet another you rank 'em, we spank 'em game for the Indiana Hoosiers. And Andy, let's go back to you again. And I just want to talk about again, how big is this win? What does it mean for Indiana from a bracketing perspective?
I think the big thing is IU just hadn't played a lot of good teams yet. So you can question the schedule and all those things, but they just hadn't had many chances to show they could beat good teams. I mean, I think Duke and Notre Dame were really the only teams they played that were or really even close to the RPI top 25. So when you look at it that way, it really ends up being pretty huge. One of the big knocks on them is obviously they don't have that signature win. Notre Dame looks better now than it did at the time, but I still don't think it's viewed, certainly in the way that this game will be. So, being able to have proven that and give yourself a little bit of, I guess, margin for error is probably not the right way to think of it, but you do give yourself a little bit, because I think you could see a scenario where they had lost this game, they go to Michigan State on Saturday or on Sunday, and that just starts to magnify, really. The need for these wins, the pressure for the ones that are remaining really amps up. And so with this one, they've got one under their belt. They've shown that they can beat a good team, and they'll kind of go from there, because I think, one thing I've been kind of watching the mock selection process today. I didn't actually get to go for family reasons, but they were going through and picking at-large teams. I think at this point, they ended the night, IU wasn't one of the ones they had picked. Now, I'm not sure exactly how deep they were, because you've got some odd overlap things with auto bid leagues and some of the teams they may have selected as at-larges will win automatic bids for major conferences, but it's somewhat telling that you're getting to a point where they're probably in the 9 to 10 seed range and they hadn't had IU in the field yet. Obviously, it's a mock selection exercise and all those kinds of things, but I do think it's somewhat telling that there's a sentiment out there that IU really just hadn't beaten enough good teams, and it's scary to think that a month left in the season, people, in large part, even us, I think at times, are not real sure how good this team is. So I think it's a really big one to get under their belt early as they enter the stretch. Hopefully, not only because it gives them some confidence, but also just kind of gets that monkey off their back a little bit early on.
Yeah. Will, some pretty interesting quotes coming out of the press conference. You want to relay those to us?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with Yogi. He said that Coach Green kept saying, "We're going to win this game," and I can see it on the guys' faces. They knew we were going to win this game. I thought that one was pretty nice. And then Hartman said, "When adversity hits, you can crumble or you can rise to the occasion," and I think we've done a good job. That was another good one. And then another one I just saw was Tom Crean said that the decibel level reached 120 on the big Cody Zeller play a couple years back, and he thinks that record was actually broken tonight. It would be pretty cool to see if it was, because it was pretty loud in there tonight.
It was, and again, it was Assembly Hall magic. And look, you're going to have a little extra magic when Cody Zeller is in the house. I thought the fans were great, and I thought an important key is that for the first time in 4 games, Indiana got off to a good start. I mean, they were up 19-10. They ended up getting a 16-point lead in that first half. I think it was 36-20, and really allowed the crowd to get into it early. And obviously, building that big lead was important, because Iowa was able to make a run. I mean, after it was 36-20, I mean, Iowa outscores Indiana by 7-8 points the rest of the way, whatever it was. But obviously having that lead gave you a little bit of cushion. So I thought it was important, as important as the bench was. They were my banner moment tonight. I thought it was important that the starters got off to a good start and erased the memory of that Penn State game really quick. We knew that wouldn't linger. And then it was about making adjustments. And Andy and Ryan both, I want to talk about Coach Crean real quick, because I think, look, you looked at the end of that first half, the start of the second half, it started to feel familiar, where Indiana came out with a good plan, executed that plan, but as soon as the other team adjusted, they really hit Indiana in the mouth. And it looked like, they were going to be able to continue that run. But I thought Indiana then adjusted again, which we don't often see. And adjusted defensively, adjusted offensively, adjusted with the substitutions and with the lineups that were playing. And clearly, for the players to say that, Crean, was keeping the guys confident, was keeping them focused on what they needed to do. But I thought, really, this is not a game where you can look at it and say, oh, Indiana won in spite of Crean, or saw a lot of tactical mistakes late. I thought Coach coached a good game tonight. Ryan, what'd you think?
Yeah, I think you got to give credit where it's due, and I think that. When Indiana was clearly facing that Iowa run, lots of people were calling for. He did take a timeout, but lots of people were calling for massive changes and things like that, on Twitter. And he kind of stuck with his guys. He sort of tinkered slowly with the lineup, brought in individuals, and tried to fit them in to see what they were doing. And then when he found that right combination, that group that was Yogi, Robert Johnson, Troy Williams, Max Bielfeldt, and I don't know who the Hartman was in there for a while. And then he also had Juwan Morgan in for a bit. But once he found that group and they were being successful, he didn't panic and think, okay, there's 5 minutes left, I want to get some of these guys a rest. He just wrote it out. And I'm sure he was asking guys in time, do you need a break? Do you need a break? That coaches always do that. And those guys, he rode those guys to the finish. And I think that was a huge change for him, because he loves to do those line changes type substitutions, bringing 3 guys at once, kind of swap guys out. But this group was playing well, and he stuck with them, and I thought that was the biggest adjustment of the game. I think that they mixed it up. I thought that Iowa, when they went zone, we really stagnated offensively. And I thought in the second half what they did was they brought one of the cutters, instead of having him cut along the baseline, he would cut to the free throw line, and they'd throw it in there and then have over the top to Bryant down low. Anunoby did that a few times. Really worked well, and Iowa went out of the zone after that. Because that hole in the middle of the zone, right about the free throw line, was getting exposed, and they went back to man-to-man for most of the rest of the game. I also think they did a great job getting the ball in after those timeouts and stoppages late. A couple of them were a little dicey, but they got the ball in, got the guy to come to the ball, and part of the reason they were dicey is I think that they were getting fouled trying to cut through, and they finally called one on a non Yogi, when he was trying to cut through to go to the ball, was getting blocked, and that's a foul, and they finally called one late, but it happened on like 3 straight. But again, if that happens, you can't react to it. You have to find your secondary option, and they did that. And so they got the ball in, they got fouled, they went to the free throw line, nobody panicked, and yeah, he did a great job keeping them focused and keeping everything together down the stretch.
No one's ever accused Coach Crean of being too relaxed in his post-game press conferences, so it's always nice when he's got jokes in his post-game press conference. What I'm seeing right now, Alex Bozich tweeting that Crean said, Troy was like Lazarus. He resurrected himself a couple of times, which we mentioned, especially after that early benching. And then, Will, you've got another one here, as Crean was talking about heading up to East Lansing. What was that quote?
Yeah, he said, apparently it's only going to get easier from here as the team heads to East Lansing. I'm assuming he's joking. I'm not watching or listening. I'm just getting the Twitter feed, but I'm assuming he's joking.
I'm sure he is. Hey, Coach is basking in the glow of a big win like this. It's okay. He's allowed a couple of jokes. Andy,
all right, wait, hold on, guys.
In.
I gotta ask real quick. Where does this rank in big wins for Indiana under Crean? I mean, this has got to be top 6 probably, right? And probably the biggest in 3 years, I think. Number 4 team.
Look, I mean, it's
number 4 team in the country for first place in the Big Ten this late in the season. I mean, that's pretty enormous.
It's a big one.
That's as big as it gets, really. I mean, of course, obviously there's Kentucky and there's tournament wins and stuff like that. But I mean, of like a regular season win, this is one of the better ones of his tenure, I think. I mean, just looking back on it.
Yeah, given the quality of the competition. Yeah, and how much it means. I mean, this is a big game. You lose this, and then you're going into East Lansing on a 2-game losing streak. That's going to be rough. Andy, certainly, if any thoughts just on the importance of this game or the impact Coach Crean had tonight?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Ryan, because it like makes you want to think of the Maryland game from last year. But I think what makes this game more, I think it's certainly more important from a tournament perspective. But I think just more impressive is the way that, I'm not going to say it's easy to come out and blow somebody out the way they did with Maryland last year, but I think it takes a lot more and hopefully reveals a lot more about a team by jumping out to a big lead, losing that lead, and being able to come back and take the game back. I mean, you saw similarly, Purdue has a huge lead against Iowa at halftime. They lose that lead, and they end up losing the game fairly handily at that point. So I thought that was just, again, kind of resiliency. It feels like a theme that we've used a lot for this team this year. So I thought it was important in that way. And I think, I agree, like we talked about with Crean, certainly, sticking with that lineup toward the end is something that I guess as somebody who looks at the lineup stuff pretty closely, is something that I've lamented a number of times, is why go away from something that's working. I thought he didn't do that tonight. They didn't make a couple changes with the zone offense in the second half. I thought they were setting a lot of ball screens out top that just weren't doing anything. They made this couple plays that you mentioned when OG was in, really got himself free at the free throw line, was able to dish it to, I think it was Bryant for a bucket on one case, and then I think get fouled on another, or maybe got a missed shot, and somebody got a rebound. But at the very least, it was putting some pressure on Iowa in a way that setting ball screens around the top of the key we're not doing against the zone, and eventually kind of got them out of that. So I guess you can attribute that change to him. But the other thing I thought was good, we talked a little bit about the turnovers. I think you kind of waited for Iowa to start pressing. That was really one of the things that turned around that game for them in West Lafayette when they beat Purdue, and so they tried that in spurts. But it seemed like when they did it, IU was able to get relatively easy buckets or good looks off of it in most cases. So I think that's probably a testament from a preparation standpoint to having those guys ready to face it, getting the ball where it needed to be in the middle of the floor, and got some easy baskets that way. And I think kept Iowa from doing that more often. Part of that, the other thing that probably kept them from doing that was they just weren't getting anything out of their bench. So I think McCaffrey, by the same token, didn't feel like he could play as many guys as he might normally do. So, those things were big, but I thought IU handled that press really well. A couple careless turnovers, but I guess when you kind of put this in the grand scheme of what we've seen this season, certainly one of their better performances given the situation, given the competition level from a turnover perspective.
Yeah, one of our Twitter followers, Megan Rogers, is reminding me on Twitter that I said before the game that I kind of had this premonition that Robert Johnson was going to hit a game-winning shot to win this one. And no, that didn't happen. Fortunately, we didn't need a game-winning shot. But I do want to take you back to the start of the second half when Iowa was off on that 9-0 or 11-0 run or whatever it was to start the second half. And the only person keeping us alive was Robert Johnson, who had 5 points, including a three, Ryan, that you mentioned earlier. That was, it was a deep three. It was a tough shot, and he made it. And those were really big points when Indiana was reeling just to kind of stay afloat. And it's not like Iowa ever got a big lead, but to keep it there, make sure it was a 2 or a 4-point game so that when Indiana did get clicking again and they were able to go on that spurt, it's not like they were trying to make up an 8-9-point deficit. So I thought that sequence from Robert Johnson was really, really important. So, Andy, real quick, let's not go into too much depth just because it's late and, frankly, it's more fun to linger on a win over Iowa than to discuss an upcoming game in East Lansing against Michigan State. But, in a couple of minutes, what's kind of your basic preview of that game and what awaits Indiana up there? Because somehow Michigan State, despite being 7-5 and in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten, is ranked in the top 10 in the country.
Yeah, they, this is one where I feel like it's a little bit similar to what we talked about with IU coming into today. Coming off the loss that they had, obviously losing at Purdue in overtime is there's a lot more dignity in that than losing at Penn State, I guess. But even so, turning around, it becomes a really big spot for them. They're 7-5, as you mentioned. I think as of last night, at least, they're tied for 7th in the Big Ten with that record. With the unbalanced schedule, I don't know that the place means a whole lot because IU is really their toughest game remaining. They're pretty heavy favorites and at least a 71% favorite by Pomeroy in every game they got left, including against IU. So they should be able to finish pretty strong. But, this is a game that I think they need to get a little bit of momentum back. They had that Maryland win, but other than that, they really haven't done a whole lot in Big Ten play. They're in somewhat of a similar boat as IU, quite frankly, when you look at who their Big Ten wins have come against. So it becomes a really important game for them on a number of fronts. And if you look at some of the numbers, probably surprising to many to see how effective their offense has been. So from an efficiency standpoint, they're currently 3rd in the country overall, 1st in conference games. So that obviously is going to be a big deal. They don't take great care of the ball. They don't get to the free throw line on that, but they kill you on the offensive glass, which is pretty much a staple of any Tom Izzo team, and will certainly be a focus for IU given what they allowed Iowa to do on the boards tonight. And they've shot the three really well. They didn't do that as well against Purdue, but they're hitting almost 45% from three in Big Ten play. So that's something IU has done a good job of over the course of the season. Really trying to press out on them. I thought they did a good job against that against Iowa. And I think Doc had even tweeted something out that for people who say you can't chase people off the 3-point line and crowd the lane at the same time, watch the last few minutes of IU. So I think you're going to see more of the same approach as what they did, trying not to let guys like Bryn Forbes get going, and he struggled against Purdue, so probably due for a bit of a bounce back from him. So that's kind of what to watch when they've got the ball. Michigan State's still pretty good defensively, as you would expect. They have the number 1 2-point defense in Big Ten play and the number 3 3-point defense. So they do a lot of their damage there in preventing offensive rebounds and really preventing opponents from shooting a good percentage. So IU's going to need to knock down some threes early to loosen things up. But I think ball movement, not getting in some of these stagnant offensive sets as they kind of got lulled into a couple times toward the end of the first half today, and then again early in the second half will be important for them. And then individually, you kind of go from out of the frying pan into the fire, from going from Utah to Denzel Valentine and trying to figure out how you're going to how you're going to defend him. So, again, I think you're going to see a similar approach to what they did with Utah. If you're going to see them throw a little bit of everybody at him and see just see what they can do, I think you'll see the freshman on him. I think you'll see Hartman on him, maybe a little bit of Troy, but he's really the big challenge for them. He's been forced to initiate their offense a bit more with Tum Tum Nairn out with a foot injury, and I don't think he's supposed to be back. And Izzo said even if he does come back, he's not going to play big minutes. So I think that's I don't want to say limited Valentine a little bit, but it's definitely made him play a little bit differently in the role he's been asked to play with Nairn out. So I think IU's going to throw the kitchen sink at him and try to figure out what they can do. And again, just really got to keep Michigan State off the glass. If there's one thing I think to look for in that game, it's going to be rebounding, how they can do that, how they can improve on the things that didn't go as well tonight, even in a victory up in East Lansing in a tough environment. And the turnovers, obviously, even though Michigan State hasn't done a great job of forcing them, I think they're last in the Big Ten in turnover rate defensively. We've seen IU struggle with that a lot over the last few years. So we'll be interested to see, can they repeat tonight's performance and turn the ball over 11 times? I think any of us would probably be pretty happy with 11 turnovers in that environment and feel like that gives IU a decent chance to win.
Ryan, you're indicating you'd like me to toss it to you. Is this to profess your man crush on Matt Costello?
No, actually, it's not. I'm not a big fan of his, actually. Denzel Valentine, it's a different story. No, I think that people have to temper their expectations for this game. There's a couple things playing against IU here. It's going to be an early game. What time's tip? I didn't even. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, so that's a really early game. Those are typically very sloppy. It's at
so did
Michigan
State play at 8, and we play at 1, and they're on the floor at 8 o'clock. Like, why is that such a big difference?
Well, no, it's just it leads to a sloppy game which favors the home team almost always, and it works against the team that turns the ball over a lot. So
Bingo.
Both teams have to deal with it. It's not, but it usually those morning games are tough to get up for. They're for some reason guys just struggle with it. Usually it's sloppy. Usually it's ugly. Legs aren't all the way there. Jumpers are off. Everything works against you. And it's at Michigan State, which is a very difficult place to play. And Michigan State's coming off of a loss. They really think they should have won at Purdue in overtime, and they're pretty salty about the way that game ended. IU is riding high right now and cannot do what they did after the Michigan game and read press clippings and things like that, because as soon as you feel comfortable, that's when you get smacked around. So Indiana's got to stay in that game as long as they can. Just neutralize Michigan State, hang around, and hopefully try and steal a win on the road. But that is the game from the beginning of the year I thought was going to be the toughest on the schedule, at Michigan State late in the season, with a guy like Denzel Valentine running the show and Tom Izzo coaching. That's just going to be real tough. But I will say this about Michigan State. Look, they started 13-0, and they're 7-5 in the Big Ten. So they can be beaten. And it's just a matter of Indiana going up and doing it.
Yeah, I really hope that you're just setting us up for a big surprise when you pick Indiana to beat Michigan State, because otherwise you're just dragging us down on what's an otherwise really exciting night.
Hey, tonight was great. I'm not trying to do it, but if we're going to talk Michigan State, I think we should put all the cards on the table and just be honest here. That's a heck of a basketball team that has not played up to its potential, and as you said, they're ranked in the top 10, and they're 7-5 in the Big Ten or whatever it is. But that's a team that is really dangerous. I know at least half a dozen people who think, oh yeah, no, they'll turn it on in March and go to the Final Four. So that's a really, really good team, and so it's just IU has to be ready to play and has to come out on fire, or it could get ugly. Just because, and no matter who Michigan State was playing in that game, that could be the case. If it were Maryland, if it were Iowa, whoever, if going into that situation where Michigan State's coming off a loss, that's a very tough game. So yeah, I hope that IU just jumps out on fire, makes a lot of threes early, gets going, gets Valentine in foul trouble. Costello trips on his way to the game and can't play. Whatever happens, but they get their fire alarm pulled the night before. I don't know, something. I'm not trying to telegraph hints to friends, but it's going to be a very difficult game, and here's hoping IU comes out on fire.
I will counter your pessimism with Candy Stripes from the chat, who says IU will have to play its best game of the season to beat them on their court, which is true. But we just saw Indiana play a really good game against Iowa, so maybe this. And look, we've seen this Indiana team play up and unfortunately down to their competition. But now that the schedule is getting tougher and we're playing good teams, hopefully we'll see Indiana continue to play up to the competition like they did. We all know it's going to be a tough game in East Lansing, but certainly winning tonight and the way Indiana won tonight gives you some confidence that they can go up there and frankly compete with anybody. This is now a team, the KenPom standings are updated. Indiana now up to 20th. The defense took a bit of a tumble tonight, down to 57th now. As you know, this was an offensive game, and Iowa scores 1.25 points per possession, but Indiana counters it, scoring 1.34 points per possession of their own against a really good Iowa team on defense. So now Indiana's offense up to 16th in the country. So a good night for the Hoosiers. And in just a minute here, we will give our picks and go to last call. And linger on this wonderful IU victory for just a little bit longer tonight before we wrap up. One final reminder, make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe, get on the email list, or you can text Indiana, INDIANA, to the number 44144. You want to get on our email list so that you can make sure that you get our post-game emails, as well as other important alerts and content updates that we send via email. So get on that list, join the 1,600-plus other IU fans who are on it. We hope to see you there. All right, Hoosier fans. Well, it was a big victory for the Hoosiers, 85-78 tonight over Iowa. We are breaking it all down here on this episode of the Assembly Call. And before we get to some final thoughts on this fantastic night for Indiana, it's time to go around the horn and give some picks for the upcoming Indiana-Michigan State game. I don't think we need to kick it back to Ryan, but we'll start with Andy for his pick on IU-Michigan State.
Well, I tried to look back through the Pomeroy rankings to see how many times IU has won at Michigan State, and since that started in 2002, they've won once in East Lansing. So I'm going to begrudgingly pick the Spartans. I think it's a tough turnaround for IU, a huge game for Michigan State. I think we saw that when they played Maryland up there, just how big a game it was for them. The crowd turned out and made it a really tough environment. So I hope to be proven wrong, but I think Michigan State wins it.
Will, what do you think?
Well, the last time I picked against Indiana, they kind of proved me wrong there, so I'm going to go ahead and go with Indiana to win in East Lansing. Why not? And I'd rather lose picking Indiana than lose not picking Indiana. And I can get my game back in the standing, so I'm going to go IU.
Okay. Solid logic there. Ryan, just to make it official.
Yeah, I'll say this just to temper it. Whoever Michigan State played on Sunday, I would pick Michigan State, and I'm going to stick with that. I think that the Hoosiers. I felt very confident about this Iowa game. I think we all did. Just playing at home against a very good team. Tom Crean's team usually shows up. If they win at East Lansing, it would be a bigger win than Iowa tonight. I think a much bigger win, actually. Not just for tournament seeding, but just for the team as a whole. That is an extremely difficult place to play, and you know that's Michigan State after they've been stung by a hornet, you know, coming in with their hair on fire. So hopefully, being an early game, it'll be sloppy for them too, and the crowd won't be as live as it would be on a weeknight or something like that. But I've got to go with Michigan State. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I just think that they're gonna end up outlasting IU.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's easy to pick Michigan State. As Andy said, Indiana's only won once there. You know, when Victor Oladipo made some huge plays down the stretch to win that game in 2013. But I think there's some reasons to feel good about Indiana. Frankly, if Indiana had played poorly tonight, not beaten Iowa, I wouldn't be feeling very good. But I like the way Indiana played tonight, and I thought they showed mental toughness. And yes, it's easier to have mental toughness at home when you have the crowd to pick you back up. But I really thought it was Indiana, the players on the court, that picked the crowd back up as opposed to the other way around when Harrison Niego made that big shot and gets that big steal and it gets everybody going again. I thought Indiana really showed a lot of intestinal fortitude tonight against a great team to be able to come back and not just kind of squeak by at the end, but really be in control of the game for the final 7-8 minutes. Plus, here's an interesting little stat for you, okay? What is the biggest problem for Indiana when they struggle and when they lose? It's turnovers, right? Again, no surprise that tonight Indiana keeps the turnovers to 17%. They end up winning the game. Michigan State is 345th in the country at forcing turnovers. They only force turnovers on 14% of their opponents' possessions. Now, look, we know that Indiana can they don't need anybody to force turnovers. They have plenty of unforced turnovers on their own. I think Yogi just dribbled the ball once into Clemens tonight. Robert Johnson dribbled the ball out of bounds all on his own. And so we know that there will be a couple of those. But if you're playing against a team that's not going to force many turnovers either, that's certainly going to help you protect the ball. And Indiana is, I believe, I haven't seen an updated number, but the last time they were in, it was a couple weeks ago when Luke Wynn had Indiana in his top 16. Indiana is the #1 offense in the country when you remove the turnovers or possessions where they turn the ball over. And so if you can go into East Lansing and if you can protect the ball, and maybe they build some momentum with that tonight, maybe playing against an opponent that doesn't force a lot of turnovers can help them do that. Now you give this great offense a chance to shine, and I know all the reasons why they might lose, but that is one big reason why they may win, coupled with the confidence that they will gain tonight. So I'm going with the Hoosiers. I say they go into East Lansing and get it done on Sunday. Will, I agree with you. Way to stay strong. Don't listen to these naysayers over here. All right, so let's go with some final thoughts. No need to go quickly, guys. This was a beautiful night, a wonderful win. Let's linger on it for a little bit. The sweet, sweet taste of IU victory. Andy, let's go with you first. Last call.
To be fair, I really thought that Will was going to say he was going to pick against IU again because it worked so well the last time that he picked against them, and they turned around and played really well. So that was you had me fooled with your logic there. So we'll see. Either way, I hope you're right in this case. I think when you look at this game from a tournament perspective, there's a feature on WarrenNolan.com that I use for RPI stuff sometimes, and it'll do like a live update as games finish. So if this is to be believed, IU jumped about 20 spots in the RPI just by winning this game. So if you want to look at this strictly through the NCAA tournament lens, it's certainly a huge win for IU. If you want to take a step back from that and not get too hung up in the numbers and all those kinds of things, I think it's equally big. It would have been really easy for this team to, fold up shop as the game kind of got away from them, and it's certainly something that that we've seen from them from time to time over these last few years, and I was really impressed with the way that they battled back, and again sparked by a shot from Harrison Diego, who came in and gave them a really good spark in the first half, did the same thing in the second half, and probably an example that we didn't bring up when we were talking about Coach Green. But that may have been the best button that he pushed all night, was to bring in Diego, a guy who's played pretty sparingly in Big Ten play. So, just cool to see the team sparked with something like that and really get going offensively. And I think Iowa is a good defensive team, and IU scored over 1.3 points per possession tonight. And part of that, Jared, is, as you mentioned, they didn't have the turnovers to drag that down. So I totally agree with you. If they can carry that up to East Lansing and that kind of ability to take care of the ball and shooting is something they can pack in a suitcase and take up there with them, I will feel really good about their chances to win the game, because this team is pretty tough to beat, even with a couple lulls where it felt like they really struggled to score during some what seemed like lengthy stretches during the game. To still end up with that point per possession for the game is really impressive and speaks to how this team did. And so, the other thing I can kind of see is, another good game from Yogi. We didn't talk a ton about him tonight. Thought he really struggled with the shot, kind of stuck with what he was doing. I thought one of the tougher shots that he took was the three that he actually made. There were a few that he was really able to step into and pull up on the break that we've seen him make time and time again that he missed, and the one where he's kind of fallen to the side a little bit on the sideline is one that goes in. So by the same token, if you kind of look at playing the percentages, feels like he's going to be due for a big game up there, and hopefully we'll see that. But for now, these guys should enjoy this win. It's a really big win. It gets a little bit of that monkey off their back. It no longer is they haven't played anybody. How good are they really? Hopefully we put some of those things to bed, even in the not too distant aftermath of the Penn State game. So hopefully they carry the confidence from tonight's game. They get a little bit of rest. It's a relatively quick turnaround for IU versus Michigan State, who played on Tuesday night. So we'll see how that goes, if that has any impact or not. But I'm sure they'll be ready to go. And quite honestly, at this point, just waiting on figuring out who the next guy to kind of step from obscurity into the spotlight for this team is, because it seems like it's somebody different, or at least a guy or two different each game.
By the way, according to Twitter reports, Joe Lunardi has already bumped Indiana up to a 7 seed, so it's your move, Bottoms. Ryan, I believe, is over there marveling at Bill Walton playing a glockenspiel.
He still has LSU ahead of IU, I'm sure, it would be my guess.
Well, sure, because they have the great Ben Simmons, the greatest basketball player of all time. Will, last call.
Yeah, I mean, Andy pretty much nailed it. I mean, this is a fun game. Just enjoy it while they can. Don't look back on it once tomorrow hits, but definitely enjoy it. Enjoy it tonight, but then definitely put your sights on Sunday because that's going to be a really big game. Another reason why I'm going to go IU on that one that I did not mention in the picks point, that it is my second wedding anniversary, so I'm excited for that. I think that's going to have some good karma, a little good voodoo there with that game. Something about playing on Valentine's Day against Valentine, I don't know. Something's just weird about that as well. But something I'll leave with another quote from Kareen. He said if we would have lost tonight's game, it wasn't because they weren't doing anything they could do to win, which kind of just sums up this episode as a whole, as we just kind of talked about this team's effort throughout the whole game, how they're able to take that punch late in the second half, but still find a way to come back and get it. And then, Jared, you've been talking about it, you rank them, we spank them. Well, top 5 teams in the last 5 years, 1-6. Top 10, 1-8. Top 25, 2-16. They ain't going to beat us in our house. Hopefully we can do it there in East Lansing come Sunday.
Well, I'm not hearing Jared, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump in with mine. I think he got cut off. So my last call will be this team could have folded up shop several times in this game. Could have just gone home and packed their bags, and they didn't. They stepped up when things got rough, when things got bad. They responded in a positive way. After the Penn State loss, we said, it's not about this loss, it's about how you respond to it. And they responded tonight, and they played a great basketball game. Guys weren't even at their best. I mean, their best player, Yogi, did not have his best game, and they still were able to pull it out and win. Yogi did a great job down the stretch, but let's face it, that wasn't his best game. But it was a grinding win. They did all the things they needed to do. They took care of the basketball. Well, they took care of the basketball relative to what we're used to seeing, so we'll keep that in there. But I think that was a huge sign for this team. And now, tomorrow, if you see me on Twitter saying, it's not about the Iowa win, it's about how they respond to it. That's how you've got to be in the Big Ten. It's really on to the next one. It's great to win this game, and I hope you all go out tonight and play Sink to Visit Knicks and enjoy it and have a great, responsibly, of course, but have a great time and enjoy it. But at the same time, this team's got to get back to work tomorrow. It's on to the next one, and it's not about tonight. It's about how they respond to it and about how they carry that momentum forward. So great win. Really excited about it for this group of players who have been through a lot and really had their backs against the wall a few times this year and have really stepped up. And it's a great win. Now let's go get Michigan State at East Lansing.
Hey, so quick question for you guys. 3 times this year I've worn my lucky IU get up with my IU shoes, my candy stripe pants, and the shooting shirt, and we're 3-0. I've only worn it 3 times: the Notre Dame game, the Michigan game, and the Iowa game, all of which I kind of considered must-wins at the time. Do I keep wearing it, or do I kind of save it now for the next must-win? Because no one really thinks...
I'm going to go ahead and blame you for the Penn State loss since you didn't wear it then. After you
I
wore it,
shouldn't need to wear it for Penn State. Come on.
Don't mess with a streak. You wore it for Michigan. They played well, and then you ignored it for Penn State. Yeah, I'm calling Yogi on you.
Andy, Will, any thoughts on this? What do you think? Do I dare waste it for Michigan State?
It's tough. It's a tough call. I don't know. I say you do it. I mean.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Okay. All right. We'll take that under advisement. Look, folks, this was a wonderful night to be an IU fan. The Hoosiers come through with an 85-78 win, and it had everything that you want out of an IU game. The Hoosiers come out early. They're making shots. The crowd is into it. But Iowa, being the veteran team that they are, they come back and they battle back. And I remember, I think it was at the under-16 or the under-12 timeout. It was 50-50 or 55-52, something like that. But it really felt like Iowa had the momentum. And I remember thinking, and maybe I even tweeted it, we're going to find out a lot about this team's mental toughness right now. And we did, because Indiana played with tremendous mental toughness down the stretch. Yes, the Assembly Hall magic helped, but Indiana made the plays they needed to make and made the free throws they needed to make down the stretch. And it was a really great night to see. And it was great to see Indiana basketball feel like what it should feel like, to see all the tweets about how great Assembly Hall was. You got John McKinley or McGinley, whatever his name is, the guy who played Dr. Cox in Scrubs, who's there because he's doing a movie with Angelo Pizzo, tweeting out that it was the greatest basketball atmosphere that he's ever seen. That is Assembly Hall. That's what it's supposed to be like. And when you have an Indiana team that is talented, that plays hard, that plays together, and that competes against the nation's best, which is exactly what Indiana basketball should be, you're going to have nights like that. And they need to become the rule again, not the exception. And it's been great to see Assembly Hall rocking like that. Purdue's going to be coming in, Maryland's coming in, and I think we'll have more opportunities for games just like that. The big key, and it was either Ryan or Andy that mentioned this, I think it was Ryan, is now how does Indiana respond? This has always been a team under Tom Crean that has played better as an underdog than it does in a front-running role. Maybe not always, but a lot of the time. Now, Indiana will be an underdog against Michigan State, always a tough place to play, but we'll see. But it's, as we go forward now, if Indiana can keep racking up some of these big wins, are the guys able to handle success? Because sometimes handling success can be as difficult as handling failure. And we've seen this Indiana team really bounce back nicely from really tough losses. Coming back from that Duke game, going on the big streak. Coming back, winning at Michigan. Coming back after the tough Penn State loss, winning tonight. So now, after Indiana gets their biggest win of the season, and people are putting to bed all the questions about has Indiana played anybody, do the Hoosiers still have that chip on their shoulder? Can they take that chip up to Michigan State and tough it out, where Michigan State is probably going to shoot well, and they're going to have the crowd behind them, and they'll go on runs? Can Indiana come right back like Iowa did tonight, but then can the Hoosiers play better over the final few minutes than Iowa did tonight and somehow find a way to get that win? It would be huge if it happens. Either way, the Hoosiers got the big win they needed tonight. I'm really proud of the team. They played well. They played hard, and I think Tom Crean was right. He mentioned in his postgame, even if we didn't win this game, it wasn't going to be because these guys weren't giving their all. And I know early in the second half when Iowa was making their run, a lot of the guys who were there in person were tweeting that this Indiana team looks tired. They looked gassed. And I was all ready to come on here and kind of bring up the whole thought of, hey, this has happened in Februarys before. They had that big practice, that hard practice on Super Bowl Sunday as Crean wearing the guys out. But they dug deep. They found the energy. They found the intensity, and they won. That's the mark of a really good team, as is winning when your best player is shooting 2 for 12. Indiana did that tonight. It's a great night for IU, a huge win for the Hoosiers, and let's go get them on Sunday and bring another one back from East Lansing. Thank you all very much for watching live. I thank you all for listening on the podcast. All of you listening on the Sports Buzz in Louisville, we thank you too. We love you guys. We do this for you. And obviously, it's the most fun on victorious episodes like this one when the Hoosiers play as well as they did tonight. Indiana wins 85-78 over Iowa. A wonderful night here on the Assembly Call. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you all on Sunday after IU Michigan State. Have a good night, everybody.